start in just a second here. Appreciate you all coming over here to hear about some environmental inequities, the history, kind of why you should care about it. Hopefully you already do. And what we can maybe do about it as individuals. So I want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for coming. I want to thank our amazing panel here. I'll introduce them in just a second. But we want to just welcome you all to the panel on environmental inequities. My name is Christina Lagone. I am the Assistant Director of Classrooms at a Nashville-based nonprofit called Urban Green Lab. And if you see any of these beautiful ladies over here with the black shirts on, the wild people with black shirts on, those are my teammates. So Urban Green Lab, we teach communities how to live sustainably, and I specifically help educators to bring a lens of sustainability into their classrooms. So it's a really exciting thing. If you want to talk to anybody on the panel after, we'll stick around, but we're going to kind of just hop right into it. And so I'd love for you all just to sit for just a second. We're sitting here in a big field in Tennessee, and just think about nature. Think about the environment. Think about how you feel about it, what it brings up for you. Is it joyful? Is it peaceful? So for some folks, it takes a little longer to get to that joyful and peaceful part when you're thinking about nature and the environment. For reasons like maybe they have some industry in their backyard, landfills right near their house, perhaps they don't feel safe when they're out doing things in nature. And so we're kind of here to unpack that so that we can get as many folks as possible to have that equal access to safety, dignity, and joy in our natural spaces. So just kind of keep that centered while we're talking today. That's kind of why we're here, is to make sure that everyone has that shared dignity. So we're here today with this amazing panel to discuss the fact that marginalized communities, and especially communities of color, do not have the same access to environmental spaces and are overwhelmingly burdened by the byproducts of an unsustainable society. Pollution and disasters and land use affects everyone eventually, but our most marginalized communities are affected first, worst, and for the longest. Environmental justice aims to reduce this harm, increase meaningful participation in decision-making, and ensure that everyone has safe access to clean places to live, work, play, and worship. Essentially, it's a concept of shared dignity that touches every aspect of our society. So we're here today to discuss why these environmental inequities exist and what we can do about it as individuals who both make up and hold up systems with our votes, wallets, and voices. So we're individuals, but we are part of a system. We make those systems, we hold them up, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how can we maybe move the dial to a more just and dignified world. So it's pretty heavy to get into at 12 o'clock for 45 minutes. But I'm going to hope that this is a really engaging conversation with some amazing folks. And we might have one other person join us because it's Bonnaroo, and we have to be flexible and have a good time. So let's get into it. I'm only sharing a small portion of the bios here today because we have an extensive and deep panel here of great wisdom. And so our first panelist was supposed to be the Honorable Marquita Bradshaw, who is a Tennessee native with extensive experience in the environmental justice movement and as an advocate for human rights. Marquita grew up in South Memphis, a community with a legacy of pollution, and is an alumna of University of Memphis. She was the first Black woman to be nominated for the Senate by a major party in Tennessee. Hell yeah. And now she is the founder and executive director of Sowing Justice, a nonprofit helping to empower, connect, and meaningfully include into decision-making processes the folks who have traditionally lived, worked, and played closest to sources of pollution. So Marquita is en route right now, and so we are sending her all the peace and good luck to get here and maybe join us for the discussion at the end. But y'all should know her, she is a fantastic person. And so she actually had a wonderful idea, since we're at Rue, why not share a song or a music genre or an album that really connects folks so we can understand who these people are on this panel and what their organizations do. So we're gonna do that after I introduce each person from now on. So next we have over here, we have Fredrick Cawthon. Can you give a little wave? Yes. Leading expert in the hemp industry, holds an MBA from Tennessee State University with a storied career in product and program management, yes, TSU, He is the co-founder and CEO of Verge Agritech, which is advancing sustainable agriculture products and technology for good. He is also the president of the Hemp Aliiance of Tennessee, and he is the chair of the Minority Empowerment Committee for the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which helped write the 2018 Farm Bill, which legalized hemp in the United States. So everyone welcome Fredrick. And Fredrick, what's that song or genre or anything you want to share?
I'm going to go with Nas, If I Rule the World.
There you go.
I was free. Everybody knows, yeah.
Beautiful.
Because to me, I thought about this, just before we were getting ready to come on stage, and it was like going back in time. No, what Nas was hoping for in that song is for us all to be one, and all have an opportunity. So if I rule the world, we would all be one, and everyone would have the opportunity to pursue truly in this country of prosperity, truly pursue their dreams.
Beautiful. Thank you, Fredrick, and welcome. And next to him we have Mage. He is a Nashville-based artist and activist who worked in the recycling industry for 10 years, with much of his work centered around building landfill diversion programs for music and arts festivals. In 2023, he shifted his focus completely to a land stewardship project on 125 acres, where he and his partner May host retreats to foster a reconnection to nature through earth stewardship, kinship, and herbalism with their company Moss & Bones Apothecary. His newest project, Mandala, intends to 3D print livable structures from clay onto that land. Mage, thank you. And what is your song or genre?
So I grew up listening to punk rock and hardcore metal, and I like all music first and foremost, but this band that I saw, they're from Belgium. It's a female-led band. She's the drummer and the singer. It's called Brutus, and the song is called Brave. And it's a song that talks about walking through the desert of society and to be basically in a place of thirst for real meaning and soul. And the lyrics of the song talk directly to the listener, and it's saying how brave they are to walk through this modern world. And it's a song of hope, and it's really beautiful. It's post-hardcore, so it's not really heavy. It's got melodic parts, and but yeah, it's Brave by Brutus.
Thank you, Mage. And then next to him we have John McFadden. He is TEC's or Tennessee Environmental Council's former CEO, who has over 3.5 decades in conservation and sustainability. He is connected with everyone from governors to garden clubs, and has raised over $4 million towards conservation efforts and led thousands of volunteers in stream restoration, reforestation, and planting over 700,000 trees. Thank you so much, John. John, what's your song or genre?
Well, I think I could be the oldest person up here at 61,
Woo.
but I'm going to go with A Peaceful, Easy Feeling by the Eagles.
Here we go.
I found myself in the early 80s out on the mountainside in the forest, and it just gave me a peaceful, easy feeling, and I want everybody to be able to experience nature in that way. So
Yes, sir. Thank you. Peaceful, easy feeling. And last but not least, my dear friend over here, we have Jafee Judah. He is a Nashville native and the executive director of Recycle and Reinvest, a nonprofit which engages vulnerable youth to improve their environment while also increasing their confidence and pride. Since 2018, Recycle and Reinvest has renovated 50 plus neighborhoods and properties as they work to reduce the gap between litter and crime. And he has also received the Am Life Award, which is awarded to those who make it their mission to give back to those in need and consistently goes the extra mile for others, and he certainly does. Jafee, what's your song?
Solid. Thank you, Wall. My track of choice will have to be my song. So I'm an artist as well, alongside being a CEO of Recycle and Reinvest. So the song of choice is, the name of the song is called Solid, S-O-L-I-D. I feel like it represents this moment right now. We're standing in solidarity, and the song Solid, the lyrics go a little something like, wherever I go, solid. Wherever I do, I'm solid. So in this moment, I feel like this is a moment of solidarity. We're standing together, but we're also out here at Bonnaroo representing our morals and values and principles that we believe in at home in Nashville, and we're representing that outside of our Nashville home. So my song of choice will be Solid. Add that to your playlist.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, wonderful. So we're going to start off with a little bit of a light lightning round to get everyone acquainted with what we're going to be kind of talking about. And so this is to everyone. And I'm going to give away kind of a main solution here to environmental inequities. We basically need to overhaul all of our systems, policies, and institutions to be more sustainable. But what are we sustaining, and whose definition of sustainability are we using? So to kick us off, I would love if each panelist could give your own personal definition of sustainability, maybe if that's evolved through the years, and we're going to make this quick. So what's your big, quick pitch for what sustainability is?
I'll start it off. What is sustainability? To us, to recycle, reinvest, to be sustainable means to be conscious and intentional. That is our definition of sustainability. We believe that you have to use what you already got and use what you got until you get better so you can use more. That is what sustainability means to us, to be conscious and intentional beings.
Thank you. Jafee, sustainability, it continues to evolve, not only year over year, but event after event. As I'm just sitting here and reflecting right now, and came with the knowledge, if I ruled the world, I would free all my sons. Well, right now at this moment, sustainability for me means no one's left behind. No one has to wake up in this country of prosperity. I go there again. Like, we have so much, but yet we will pull up to a stoplight and see somebody there with a sign needing food, underhoused. Like, there's no reason we should have an underhoused people. So when we look across the board, it's everyone has a chance, is what equality and sustainability means to me.
So for me, after working in the recycling industry, doing curbside and consumer recycling, I had a realization after 2020 where the amount of Amazon boxes, basically like 30-fold times 30, basically I realized, and one of the reasons why I moved out of that position, I know that we need to recycle. I know that we need to deal with our resources on the back end. The biggest thing is that, like, we need to rethink our consumption habits. I felt like working in the recycling industry, a lot of ways I was enabling people to keep up consumption habits, and it's not sustainable as a society. And the other thing too is, rather than corporations hiring people to make their business more sustainable, top-down corporate sustainability, we need from the ground up sustainability. That approach where everybody takes responsibility for the waste that they generate and considers their consumption habits and the impact it has on a greater scale.
First, you know what, I meant to say it earlier, but I really appreciate being up here with all of you guys, your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience. I just appreciate that. I'm honored to be here with you. You know, I'm going to kind of take more of an academic. I used to teach a sustainability class in an MBA program, and we always talked about people, planet, and profits. And we talk about it in that order, and that's the priority. When we start talking about people, we talk first and foremost about self-care. What are you doing to take care of yourself? What are you doing to take care of yourself, your spiritual, your emotional, your intellectual, and your physical health? Without those things, nothing is sustainable. Nothing is sustainable. And then the other thing that I'm going to throw out, we need a tree for this bird to land on. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah. So the other thing that I'm going to throw out, and Christina referenced this earlier in her opening remarks, that it's a retooling of how we do things. And I'm going to say that a little bit differently, because that third part is profit or economics. Sustainability is the single greatest economic opportunity this country, this state, this country, this world has ever had, because it's a retooling of the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and the chemical revolution. So it's a great great economic opportunity, but it always starts with people. And today, right now, it's self-care. Did anybody do yoga?
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And so as you can see, there's a through line of how folks talk about sustainability, especially when you're in the environmental inequities field, is that it really is that people part. The people part is really important and sometimes get lost in the traditional concept of environmentalism and sustainability. It can be about saving the whales, saving the rainforests, or things like that. And we do need those, but we also need to save us. We need to save the people, we need to save our communities. And so that's really why we're here today. So thank you all so much for sharing your wisdom. We're having a blast up here, taking pictures, there's birds. I love it. So the question that we were going to start off with Ms. Bradshaw, I just want to read a little bit more about her organization just so she gets her flowers. So her work with Sowing Justice focuses on civic engagement and pushing policy to better represent and protect communities of color. So I was going to ask her, how do the policies of the past influence the environmental inequities of the present? And where do we still see those same patterns of racist policies affecting communities of color and their burden of environmental degradation? And I also wanted her to talk about that we so often hear of communities of color or other broad terminology to refer to groups of people, but I wanted her to zoom in on the human toll that these policies take at the individual and family level. So I wanted to at least read that question so that we could get kind of situated, because she was going to kind of start us off about the history of environmental inequities and kind of why we are in this situation and why it's predominantly affecting communities of color. And I think one of the largest ones that we could talk about is redlining, and how systematically Black and brown folks were kept out of really the real estate market and put into specific neighborhoods that were then deemed as red neighborhoods where you should not invest in, you should not put white folks in, you should not have people really owning their own land. And so we kind of pushed everybody into one area of a city and then let that kind of not be upkept. So services were not really sent over to those communities, and then they were basically not given access to green space or trees. And really, when you're talking about trees, it can sound like just a nice thing, but it's an equity thing and it's a health issue. Because if you have less shade, I mean, we all are kind of experiencing that here. If you don't have shade, it can be really deadly to be in the heat. And so when we talk about, communities of color not having access to trees, it really is not just cosmetic, it's about health. It's about making sure that folks are not dying from heat stress. It's about making sure that industry is not zoned only in Black communities, that landfills are not just zoned in Black and brown communities, that Indigenous folks are given rights to their land to be able to protect it and shepherd it. So there are so many things as to why we are facing this. And I think if you are in any realm of justice in your work, you probably can guess all of the reasons why this is happening. And so these are affecting folks today. So we want to kind of dive into that a little bit more. And so Fredrick, if you don't mind, I'm going to read your question as well. But so you've done incredible work on the Farm Bill in particular, and I want you to kind of add to this point of the historical inequities and why this is happening in the current political landscape and the work that needs to be done to ensure folks aren't being left behind, like you talked about, or systematically left out as if farming, hemp, and other industries are themselves transforming. And on a broader note, if you could share a bit more about how hemp can really help with environmental inequities, that would be great.
Okay, so I will move the hemp discussion to the tail end.
Yes.
And go back historically to how did we get here? But even before that, I'm going to give you the premise of, before I even start, why the hell should you care, right? I'm going to place it in that we're in the United States of America, right? From sea to shining sea. That's a house. That's the house that you live in, whether you live by yourself, your roommate, or at home with parents. We're in one house, okay? And can you imagine that you're in that house, but nobody's making investment into you? Everyone else is eating good in the house. You come in, your room. The whole house got remodeled, but they left your room out. First of all, how would you feel? They upgraded the house and put internet throughout the house, but where you are in your room, you have no connectivity. So the impact of just that little thing is you're left out. You don't have the same advantage opportunities to say, go online, Google, create a company, all of that, because you don't have access. So that just to me hopefully paints a picture of a framework of when we talk about inequities, it's about here's the impact if it was right there in your own home and you were the individual, the red-headed stepchild. I love my redhead, but red-headed stepchild, to use a phrase, this is what it means. So how do we get there? Well, it's, everyone's heard the word systemic, and depending on who's saying systemic racism, it's just basically saying it's been weaved and built into the system, into the laws, both locally with redlining, which redlining basically meant that, here's how we know it in the streets. They live on the other side of the tracks. How the idea of the other side of the tracks even became to be a thing is the leaders of a town would say, okay, we're gonna make investments in this side of the track and not invest in there. We're gonna move and make it possible for white families to get loans. But then even if you are a black family that has got a good job, we're gonna make it, you're gonna be denied the loan over here. We will give you a loan over here, but guess what? You're gonna even pay more money in interest for your loan. That's systemic racism that has been intentionally done. But what people who believe, transcribe, and pursue those type of laws and actions don't realize, again, back to it, we're all in the same house. You can't have a house in a rich neighborhood, everything in all of these rooms, but you're trying to sell the house and come in, and then they're gonna say, but what about that back room where Johnny's at? I don't know. That just took down the value of the house. That means the house does not create the value that it could. And so this is where I'm going with this too. If we have certain set of people in this country, it's regardless, and it's less more about than races we've gone along. It's more about how much money and assets do you have. Because if you're poor, you're poor. It don't matter what color you are, right? But what the system has also done is used a wedge between us to make white people and black people not work together. Because if all of us poor people came together, they're scared of that. And so it's both, when I say inequality, it's both the systemic where laws have been put in place, but it's the propaganda and the media that then divides common like-minded people from waking up one day and saying, no, we demand better. So but then jumping real quick into the hemp side, hemp is an example of inequality. And it, not just hemp, but marijuana policies in this country. When marijuana was banned, prohibition, all of that back in 2030s, reefer madness, they made movies. This is like an agenda that is carried out by the state. When all of that was done, really, marijuana was a red herring. It was this story about black and brown people, and if you smoke weed, it's gonna make you crazy, like these people are crazy, and just all your livelihood is gonna go down. You're gonna be in the ghettos if you smoke weed. That's reefer madness, right? Well, no. The red herring was, it was really industries wanting to kill hemp. Because back in 1972, when marijuana went on the Schedule 1 drug list for DEA to come after you, hemp was also moved on to that list. But if we go back in time, hemp and marijuana is used medicinally. Well, the pharmaceutical industry couldn't sell you all these bad drugs, synthetic drugs, if you could use mushrooms and hemp and stuff like that. Hemp was used to make rope, paper, the Constitution of the United States of America. Everybody talks Constitution. It was written on hemp paper. Well, the Hearst family had nothing but forest, timber yards, everything, and they own all the newspapers. So if they can make money off of making their own money from their own money, hemp is a bad thing. It's so many industries. Henry Ford built a hemp car in the 1917, 1920s that ran off of hemp fuel, because hemp can also be used to burn and create fuel. Who else would not like that? Oil and gas. So many industries that we now look at as the big industries that were, if you go back in time, they were all being built by names like Vanderbilt's, Rockefellers, you name it. They built these industries and killed hemp. And so I'm a part of the crew that's bringing hemp back to its relevant place and timely for right now with the technology we have right now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Fredrick. And I think something that we've talked about as well is making sure that the folks who have been disproportionately given felonies or kind of arrested in any way, and then they're being blocked from being part of that industry as it revolutionizes and comes back because of alliances like yours, making sure that those folks are kind of leading the charge and not being left out when they're the ones who kind of have that expertise in there. So thank you, Fredrick, for all the work that you're doing.
That's why we got to vote.
Yes, yes. Thank y'all so much. And so, Mage, I want to give you a chance. We have about 15 minutes left to keep this chat going. I want to give you a chance to speak on how you're working to provide safe access to green space for folks to have a regenerative experience in nature. And even though Tennessee has no federally recognized tribes, we are here on Cherokee, Shawnee, Yuchi, and Chickasaw ancestral lands. And so how does the work you are doing at your sanctuary build upon indigenous wisdom? We've kind of talked about this idea of remembering as a human species. Can you expand on that and how you're building on indigenous wisdom?
Sure. So I'll start with the concept of Matakwe Oasin. So I'm waiting for this to go all of a sudden. But anyways, Matakwe Oasin, which means essentially all my relations, that we are related to everything. And it's a Lakota term. I spent a lot of time in Sweat Lodge and learning from Lakota elders. Matakwe Oasin basically means that we're related to all things. There's sentience in everything. Every blade of grass, every bug, every bird, every tree. And we've been disconnected from that notion that everything around us is alive and deserves respect and honor. So getting back into that tradition, which is the Native American, the Red Road, the Red Heart perspective of seeing the sentience and everything and honoring it as if it's related to us, because it is. So a big thing for me is bringing people that grew up in urban environments. I grew up in Nashville. I grew up 15 minutes from downtown by the fairgrounds, by the train track, between 3 different interstates. So all I heard was trains, interstate, racetrack, airplanes every day. I didn't even realize how much noise pollution until I started getting out into nature. So for me, I'm honoring the indigenous perspective and the elders that I've studied with by planting that seed of consciousness in perspective in people and creating a space for a framework for people to remember through the sanctuary that May and I are creating. And so that's the biggest thing I think is just keeping people in that perspective that we are connected and everything around us is related to us, and we have impact on that.
Thank you, Mage. I think that's such a beautiful concept of just recognizing that where do we end and where does the environment start? If we need water and air and food and soil to grow that food to keep us alive, how can we really say that we are separate from that thing? So it's such a kind of obvious thing to remember, but we've moved away from that in a lot of ways, and I think it's an apt way of talking about what we need to be doing to get justice back into our lives. And so John, I think a lot of the beautiful work that Mage is doing is bringing folks in urban centers out into more rural areas. But there is a thread of environmental inequities in rural populations as well. They may have access to green space by proximity, but so many are facing the effects of a changing climate, a changing job landscape, and have less resources to lean on in times of disasters. Your work with folks all over Tennessee, with your work at TEC and beyond, where do rural communities come into the inequities conversation for you?
Well, one of the things, I appreciate all the other ideas, things that have been presented, and you know, one of the things we've done is we've planted a lot of trees with the Environmental Council. Sorry about that. Planted a lot of trees with the Environmental Council, and you know, you can look on a map in any community, and if you look where the trees are, that's where the higher socioeconomic data are. That's where the money is. So one of those things is getting out and planting trees. And then the other thing is, I mentioned self-care earlier. I don't know if I mentioned boundaries, but I'm mentioning them now. Does anybody know why the U.S. Forest Service was established in the late 1800s? It was established to protect the drinking water supply, because the drinking water comes out of those forests. That's where the drinking water's collected. So folks in rural communities need to have really strong boundaries to protect those resources. And there is an inequity there because of redlining. One of the things I thought about when we start talking about just the economic and the systematic racism that exists, the black GIs and the brown GIs that came home from World War II and Korea and Vietnam, they didn't have access to the GI Bill where they could get a free education. They didn't have access to the low interest loans to buy houses and property. So, you know, one, we got to keep planting trees out there, that's for sure. But we've also got to acknowledge and protect. That's why I throw that word boundaries out there. We got to acknowledge and protect those resources, because the people in the city, they ain't got nowhere to grow their food. They're growing it out here, out in the country, out in the rural communities. Their drinking water's not coming from downtown. Actually, some of it is coming from downtown. It's coming off the pavement and the parking lots and the rooftops, and it's all contaminated. It's where it's coming off the forest where it's clean. So anyway, that would be my take on it.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you. And I think that kind of goes back to what Fredrick was talking about the fact that kind of pinning folks against each other when we all need each other, we all need to lean on each other for different resources and different sources of protection. It really is kind of, it's a global, but it's a country community that we need to make sure that we're growing when we're talking about this shared dignity. So Jafee, another overlooked community in so many conversations is that of our youth voice. So can you talk about how environmental inequities show up for youth in Nashville, and why it is so important to not only engage them in conversation, but to empower them towards change, like you are doing in your own organization, Recycle and Reinvest?
Man, that's a great question, and Mage actually hit on a few of those points when he was speaking about where he was from. I feel like in Nashville, environmental inequities often disproportionately affect low-income and minority communities, particularly in air and water quality and access to green spaces. In Nashville, where we're from, and also I would say, for instance, and also specific neighborhoods also may be located close to highways or industrial sites that emit harmful pollutants, while other communities may lack access to safe parks and recreational areas. Also, a lot of underserved communities where I come from, they're the food swamps. So like they don't have access to healthy food, but they do live in a community where it's like you got $500,000 homes like in the neighborhood, and then you got the projects literally across the street, but you have no access to food. And you have to drive like maybe 10 miles, 5 miles up the road just to get to a Kroger's or just to get to a grocery store. So that I would say that's one way that it shows up, and I think that's another thing that we need to pay attention to when it comes to putting on this sustainable lens and how we can improve our communities, but as well as improve ourselves as individuals. Yeah. So yeah, that's how it shows up for the youth.
And I think maybe we can talk about it. We're going to kind of turn to solutions for the next 5 or so minutes as we wrap up this panel. And thank you all so much for sharing your wisdom. It's been incredible to listen to you. And I think something that we haven't named, but has come up in almost everyone's answer, is this idea of sacrifice zones. And this idea that certain areas and certain people, well, we need to put the highway somewhere. Well, we need to put the landfill somewhere. Well, we need to put the industry somewhere. And what we're challenging you all to think about is why? Why do we need to have systems that hurt and destroy communities and individuals' health just so that we can have a little extra prosperity, or just so we can, oh, Marquita! Oh, I'm not even going to bother to try to finish that sentence. Marquita, hello. How are you? So we have about 5 minutes, Marquita, but we want to make sure your voice gets told and gets heard. We have told them what Sowing Justice does. We've told them a little bit about you. So you've been introduced, you've been given your flowers, but my darling, you have had a time, and I want you to just riff. We got a couple of minutes. Just share what you want people to know about environmental inequities and why you're doing the work that you're doing. Okay?
Excuse me if I get a little emotional, because this work is about saving lives. Black, brown, indigenous, AAPI, and poor white communities across the United States have held the burden of the world's pollution, because in Memphis we have fought to keep out nuclear waste from France, Germany, and many other places from our landfills. And those landfills are in those communities. And not only are the landfills in those communities, but those dirty jobs where people actually have to risk their lives to go to work and impact their health. And also where you have dirty jobs, you have dirty air, water, and soil. And just like my community, it was a military landfill down the street from my elementary school. And my mom died last weekend. Over a process of time. I do not wish kidney failure on anybody. But I want you to know that it is painful to not get involved. Hold the people that you elect accountable. Just don't see their name on election day, but also go to city halls, go to your county commission, go to where your aldermans meet. Find out what it is about the budget that reflects your community. Does it reflect the community by dealing with marginalization? And if it doesn't, use your voice to make this world a more equitable place, because you have the power. We can change things where we can have a future where we have clean air, clean water, and clean soil for everyone, not just the affluent.
There's not much to add to that. Marquita, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your energy, and just sharing your time and your heart when you're absolutely devastated and grieving at this moment because of your mother. I'd like, if you don't mind, can you speak your mother's name into the microphone and give her a little something? Want to do that? A little something.
Listen, we are having a celebration of life for Doris D. Berry Bradshaw. When you go into these places to get communities fair representation when it comes to the budget, you take her spirit with you, the kind of spirit that can take her friends who are working in environmental justice movement all across the United States to get a same-day appointment in the Pentagon. That was my mom. She's the same person that gives a person shelter when they don't have a place to stay. When they need food and clothing, she finds a way to do it, along with raising her 6 beautiful children and caring for her community. I have seen her feed a whole community on a Sunday afternoon, just like my great-grandmother who died of cancer before. But we have to stop this cycle, and how we stop this cycle is for you to get involved more than election day. And I can't wait to see you along the way across Tennessee working with us, because we cross paths pretty often now.
Thank you. I think Marquita really handled kind of the where do we go from here. If there's anything that you want to shout into the microphone real quick, I think we can wrap up this conversation. Fredrick, go ahead.
Hey, to learn more about the Hemp Aliiance of Tennessee is yourhat.org. That's yourhat.org.
Familiarize yourself with medicinal plants. Learn the plants, learn their names, create relationships with plants as allies. Don't use the plants, work with them.
And for us, follow us at Recycle Reinvest on Instagram, as well as our website, www.recyclereinvest.org. While you're at the festival, do not forget to reduce your waste. Carpool if you have to. Support sustainable vendors while you're here. Continue to share this information that we have talked about, and share this experience with others. And last but not least, respect nature. That's me. That's it.
One, I'm gonna go over here and get a hemp hat. I saw them selling them over there, so that's one thing I'm gonna do when I get off the stage. And then 2, you can go over to our booth there and get a Bonnaroo, I think it's called, a little pollinator bomb. You can throw it out on the side of the road or put it in your yard somewhere. And plant trees, plant trees, plant trees, plant trees.
So listen, go to social media and follow at Sowing J. We're on social media everywhere, and we're on a farm, and our motto is if we reap what we sow, S-O-W, then we will sow justice. So go to Sowing Justice, S-O-W-I-N-G, justice.org. Sign up for our newsletter and sign up to get volunteer, and we can make a difference together.
Thank you all so much. This panel was fantastic. Thank you for sitting through the heat with us. Thank you all for being so graceful and flexible as we handled this panel. I've learned so much. Go out there, bring some dignity, bring some care, honor Doris, and do well out there. All right, do good, do well. Thank you so much.